And we now welcome in George Will. I'm very happy and proud to say Pulitzer Prize winning opinion writer for the Washington Post, of course, Fox News contributor, and author of A Nice Little Place on the North Side, A History of Triumph, Mostly Defeat, and Incurable Hope at Wrigley Field. George, great to talk to you again, sir.
Glad to be with you.
Well, I appreciate that. All right. I'm sorry we picked a day where there's absolutely nothing going on. Why don't we start with the obvious, and that would be the Pope's remarks about Donald Trump, although, as we know, he didn't mention him by name. He was referring to what Trump had said, and Trump responded back. Should the Pope be weighing in on presidential politics?
I do not think the Pope should intervene in our politics. I particularly think he's probably not up to speed on what we're arguing about, and this Pope has shown a proclivity, to put it politely, for speaking about things about which he has no particular expertise. Climate change, income redistribution, all the rest. He is a long sort of Latin American left-wing political agenda, and I think it influenced this.
Yeah, and were you surprised? And do you think that Trump, I don't know if you heard everything that Trump said back, he actually read, you don't often see him reading unless it's the polls numbers at his rallies, but he actually read from a statement, and he actually blamed Mexico for influencing the Pope to speak out against him.
Well, Donald Trump is a blame the foreigners first kind of candidate, and I think he's guessing about this, but I don't think precision is Donald Trump's strong suit anyway. But so he responded in character when the Pope responded in character, and it's unseemly and unedifying on all counts.
Yeah. Do you think this will have any effect? Especially, let's look at South Carolina. I mean, there's a very small Catholic population from what I understand, but there's a big evangelical population, and they are Christians. So the Pope said he's not someone like that is not a Christian. He didn't specifically say Catholic. So will that have any influence, you think, on the outcome of the primary on Saturday?
I doubt it. I think the brouhaha itself will have an influence because it just again sucks more oxygen out of the political debate down there. It's another day when another Trump uproar is drowning out the attempts by Kasich, Cruz, Rubio, Jeb Bush, and others to try and get their message out.
Who do you like in this race? You may have stated that, but I know you're not a Trump fan, certainly. Who would you like to see emerge to take that ultimate stage against Hillary, Bernie, or Biden?
I haven't got a candidate at this point, a dog in this fight. I think Mr. Trump would lose and would deserve to lose. I think the others, I just want to see them go down the road all the way to Ohio and Michigan and elsewhere. I want to see how they perform, not just in congenial states for conservative Republicans, such as the SEC primary coming up on March 1st, but in the industrial Midwest, because the Republicans really can't be a secure national party until they regain the ability to be competitive in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, places like that.
Do you see, I mean, politically speaking, I mean, you look at the polls, except for that outlier poll of the Wall Street Journal, NBC News last night that showed nationally, and national polls shouldn't mean all that much at this point, but showed Cruz leading by 2 points nationally over Trump. Every other poll nationally and in just about every state shows Trump with a wide lead. Do you still think it's possible that he will not be the nominee?
Oh, I certainly do think it's possible. First of all, remember the old saying, the straw that broke the camel's back. Well, the straw that broke the camel's back didn't break the camel's back. It was the cumulative weight of all the straws, of which it was the last. And I do think there is such a thing as a critical mass of Mr. Trump's statements and actions that will cumulatively bring him down eventually. The American people are annoyed right now. They're angry and they're frightened, but they're not nasty, they're not mean, and they're not dumb. They don't very often make frivolous uses of their presidential ballots. The electorate that has, just in the post-war period, elected Truman and Eisenhower and Kennedy and Johnson and Nixon, Carter, Reagan, Bush, another Bush, Clinton. These are people, every one of them different, every one of them something to be said for and against them, but none of them remotely like in temperament or views Donald Trump.
All right, you wrote a great piece the other day at the Washington Post, of course, on Justice Scalia, calling him a jurist of colossal consequence. You feel free to weigh in on him, but also what I want to ask you about specifically right now is the fact that the President of the United States apparently has something better to do, although we have not been told what that is, than to attend Scalia's funeral.
Yes, that's a very unfortunate thing. He's gone to the funerals of 6 deceased Democratic politicians and 3, I think, civil rights leaders. You would think that he could have spared an afternoon in his 8 years for one of the preeminent judicial thinkers in the history of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I mean, and it hasn't happened in, and again, I don't know how many justices this would cover, but I think it's about 70 years it hasn't happened that a president skipped the funeral of a Supreme Court justice. Do you think this is politically motivated? Do you think there's a message here?
No, well, it's not politically motivated, but it's all politics. That is, this what this president does, and he's tone deaf to some of the, I'll just say, the good manners of an occupant of the Oval Office.
Let me ask you about something that I believe you said about Mitch McConnell. And, on Saturday, shortly after the death, I was actually on WMAL radio in Washington. I had the unfortunate duty of announcing the death and then talking about it for 4 hours. And right away we speculated, and Mitch McConnell came out almost immediately with that statement saying there will be no vote. Chuck Grassley, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, of course, seems to have modified that and isn't sure if there'll be a vote. And I had Orrin Hatch yesterday who said he would tell Grassley not to have a vote. But it seems like there's a crack in the ranks. What do you think will happen?
I don't know what will happen. I have a fairly settled view of what should happen. I think Grassley should hold hearings on whoever the president puts forward. I think the committee should vote on it. If they vote it down, so be it. If they don't vote it down, the people who oppose confirming the president's nominee could still say, I want to send it to the floor for a full airing for the public. Let Republicans use a floor debate to explain their objections to the nominee and then vote it down. That seems to me an orderly and educational process.
Yeah. Do you think the Republicans will crack, though? Do you think the moderate Republicans, some of those running now, re-election in danger possibly, will start saying, let's have a hearing, let's have a vote?
Well, I think they might, and I think it protects them from certain charges of obstructionism, after which they can still vote against the person.
Right. Baseball's starting up. Pitchers and catchers are there, at least for the Mets and the Yankees. I want to play you something, not to provoke you or antagonize you, but you are a huge Cubs fan, and you came this close last year. Let's watch.
Here's the payoff pitch from Familia to Fowler on the way, and it's in there. Strike 3 called. The Mets win the pennant. The New York Mets have won the National League pennant. Put it in the books. The New York Mets, for the first time in 15 years, are champions of the National League.
Oh, if it were only 15 years for the Chicago Cubs. All right, so talk about the start of baseball season. I mean, it truly is. Hope does spring eternal. And where do you think the Cubs, coming off of last year, getting this close, will wind up this year?
Well, let me begin by saying I was sitting in the front row at Wrigley Field, about 40 feet from that last pitch you just broadcast.
That was Howie Rose, yeah.
I was there. The Cubs were last in the World Series in 1945. That's 71 years ago. This year, Sports Illustrated has ranked all 30 teams. They ranked the Cubs first. I think the Cubs will almost certainly get to the postseason. There are 3 really good teams in the National League Central, the Pirates, the Cardinals, and the Cubs. But I think the Cubs are probably better than the other 2. Once you get to October, it is, as the Oakland A's Billy Beane said, it's a crapshoot. You never know what's going to happen. But I think they'll get there and should go deep into October.
Well, for your sake, I hope so. And you have a little quandary here because Daniel Murphy Cub killer and killer of others, now plays for the Nationals, and your wonderful son works for the Nationals. So how do you reconcile that?
I don't. I just root for the Cubs and keep my head down.
George, great to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Glad to be with you. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. George Will, ladies and gentlemen, the one and only. We'll be back taking your calls. 877 Newsmax, 877-639-7629.